So I said a second ago that everywhere is diverse, or at least most places are diverse. And I want to clarify a little bit about what I mean by that, because I think sometimes when we think of cultural diversity, we think of specific types of things like national origin, for example, or ethnicity. And I think when we start to really think of what a culture is, which is a shared way of doing things and thinking about things, we start to see that most people are members of multiple different kinds of cultures, and that most spaces that we're in, most types of career spaces, most types of workplaces have cultural diversity and probably multiple forms of cultural diversity or other types of diversity. And so let me share a few examples. Um, Regional origin, right? Somebody from the Northeast is going to have some. Well, let me put it this way: there are cultural tendencies in the Northeast that are different than cultural tendencies in the Southeast, that are different than cultural tendencies in the Midwest, that are different than cultural tendencies in the great and glorious state of Alaska. People that might be from indigenous nation backgrounds, people that might be from other kind or from different nations outside of the United States. Hobby groups arguably have cultures. So I put here sports fans, but there could be lots of other examples of where gamers is another really good example. You have types of hobbies that really become kind of a cultural zone unto themselves, where specific ways of talking and thinking start to proliferate. Religion, right? Most workplaces are going to have some type of religious diversity, although not all. Ethnicity and race, very obviously. Political camps, so I think in an increasingly polarized country where you have different sides of the political spectrum, even potentially listening to different types of sources of authority and sources of news, you really start to get sort of different cultural tendencies in different political groups, and that's a type of cultural diversity. Socioeconomic class, definitely, whether somebody's from working class, lower middle class, upper middle class, whatever the case may be. I would put also like rural versus urban as another example. Jobs oftentimes have a culture with them, so the type of culture from somebody that's in a trade, like my brother who works in HVAC, versus somebody that's working in kind of an academia position like a professor of anthropology. There's different cultures that go with our workplaces, different prioritizations, different ways that people think, different sorts of terminology that's relevant to what they do, and much, much more. So pretty much any workspace you're going to be dealing with has some type of diversity, and so I think anthropology is relevant. And I was thinking of a few different examples. I was looking through your start of the semester assignments where you talked to me about the different career paths you're going into, and it really struck me how pretty much every single one of them has, situations where you're going to be dealing with diversity and where it's going to be helpful to keep diversity in mind and have some thoughtful ways of approaching diversity. So for example, we have somebody in our class who's going into mechanical engineering. In a field like that, engineers oftentimes have to interface between themselves as engineers and then user groups and management and different things. And so you need to kind of understand the different ways that these different groups of people talk, and you'll be a lot more successful in your career. As Dale Carnegie puts it in his classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, engineers that rise to the top of their companies, it's typically because not so much that they're better engineers as that they are better at understanding how to work well with other people, and therefore they rise to the top of their career, right? They move into management and things if that's something you desire. Computer science, right? So I was thinking of socioeconomic class. We have somebody that's going into computer science. I'll admit that that's not a field I'm super expert on, but if I understand at least a little bit of what computer science folks might do, if you're designing different types of software or apps for people, it's really helpful to know the different classes that people are part of, because folks from different types of class might have different kinds of needs from things like an app or a software program, right? There are things that, people are always trying to get me into as far as software and apps that I'm just like, that's just not relevant to kind of what I do, right? So understanding the backgrounds of the people you're designing for. If you're a teacher, it really helps to know about people's political backgrounds, as I can definitely attest to. I have to understand where people are coming from, and especially different audiences I'm teaching to, kind of how they might be skewed politically and how different concepts might come across to them and what things I might need to explain more in depth or in different ways, what kinds of things might go without saying. Understanding your audience is just critical, and part of that nowadays is political background. I've mentioned before, if you're doing psychological counseling, understanding the ways that harmful stereotypes can be internalized for people of color is definitely relevant to your counseling practice, and I think something worthy of remembering. If you're going into business as one of our, so several people are going into psychology. We do have one person that looks like they're going into business. Understanding regional origin, understanding sort of if you're working with employees from different regions of the country, how that might affect their practices, is important and critical. I've been really shocked as somebody that's had the opportunity to live in most of the major regions of the US. I've lived in the West Coast, the Mountain West, the Rust Belt / Northeast, in Florida and in Texas and now Alaska. I've got most of the regions covered other than kind of the Deep South and the Midwest. But it's really shocked me how different the sort of overall cultural trends can be in those different areas, and understanding those so you're not sort of unduly offending your employees and you know what they might mean by different expressions and ways of dealing with you is important for anybody going into management. Somebody mentioned in their start of the semester activity that they sell anime art with a friend of theirs, and I was thinking like, wow, that's so relevant, like hobby groups and understanding what different types of art different people from different like fandoms might be interested in. And then I was thinking about the person in our class that's going into paleontology. Part of paleontology is the digging up, but most paleontologists, part of what you're doing is presenting your work to the public if you're working for a museum or a university. And so thinking about religion is part of that. That affects how people view evolution, right? Even in ways that aren't always straightforward, because you can have a group that appears to be, let's say, for example, more creationist oriented, but some folks are and some folks aren't. Some people are more accepting of evolution. Some people would be more hesitant about it. Understanding those backgrounds and understanding how to present your findings in ways that are the most useful for the largest number of people and not needlessly offensive, all of those I think are relevant. And then I put down here, we've got a couple of folks in our class that are going into nursing, and all of these are definitely relevant, but religion as kind of something that can affect the types of medicines or treatments that some people are comfortable with based on religious background. Or understanding what kinds of spiritual resources may be useful to them, and which you might recommend to them in your job as somebody that's sort of caring for the overall health and well-being of patients on a daily level. And, I could have really substituted any of these for any of these. Religion is definitely relevant to teaching. Regional origin is definitely relevant to psychology. It's just kind of where I chose to put them, what occurred to me off the top of my head. Because at the end of the day, we're all sort of living in a diverse, complex world where we come from a lot of backgrounds, and that's going to be relevant in virtually any career that you go into. So I hope you kind of bear that in mind, and if you get nothing else from this class, understand how much our cultural worlds and social worlds and histories affect us, and kind of bring a sensitivity, if I can use a word like that, to your jobs, whether you're a mechanical engineer or whether you're a CNA or whether you're selling art, whatever the case may be. Final thoughts about applied anthropology. And really kind of final thoughts for the course, because next week is really more of just kind of a placeholder review as we get ready for the final. So some sort of final thoughts. I will pause the video here and then I will actually get into that.